Guys, it's 8 Deadly Sin here coming at you with another Champ Select Analysis EU LCS. Just finished airing today. I'm going to be breaking down all of these games. Might as well start with the first one and let's jump right into it. I've ordered the bans on the bottom of the screen for you. You can see with the white text. So the first ban coming from Fnatic being on blue side is going to be Kindred. Now, Kindred is a very safe first ban. Kindred's a very versatile high-level jungler, and Kindred's ult pretty much puts a stop and pause button on any teams or any engages that happen, stops a lot of dives, makes it really hard to make pick comps and get engages that you want necessarily with that kind of stop on the action ult that Kindred has, making everyone invulnerable and giving the health back. Also, Kindred can start to do massive amounts of damage if Kindred gets ahead, so safe first ban. Second ban coming out from Origin is going to be Lulu. Lulu's very strong in the meta right now. Seeing how these games are becoming shorter and shorter, Lulu's power spikes are now more effective, does not have that late game fall off period because games are no longer getting to their average 40 minutes, and that kind of 20-minute to 25-minute range and that 15-minute range is going to be that really high level mid game champions are going to be very key. And plus, Lulu is just a cornerstone to many protect the whatever you want comps and just provides a lot of damage, especially with Thunderlords now. So a good takeaway there. Moving back to Fnatic, we ban Kassadin. Now, Kassadin is just the anti-mage, so if Fevabin is going to be playing any mages, which he does end up going, it's just a safe ban. Also, Kassadin has good scaling into the late game, has that assassin pick potential, the mobility with the Rift Walk, and all other factors, and plus insane damage when you get to full level Kassadin, full build Kassadin. So just another pretty safe takeaway. Nothing really here that necessarily would substitute well as that ban. Definitely not the greatest ban in terms of other strong meta picks that are available, but not a bad ban as well. Moving on to the next ban coming from Origin, we have Gangplank. Now, Gangplank is probably one of the strongest top laners right now in the meta, along with Fiora. We can see that Fiora has been ignored in this entire banning process. And so is Lissandra, and I'll get into that when we get into picks. But Gangplank is super strong, does a lot of damage, has zoning potential with the barrels and the global with his ult and slow. So just a really good takeaway, very strong. Don't want to give it up to Fnatic. Moving on to the next ban coming from Fnatic, it's going to be Tahm Kench. Tahm Kench is one of the strongest flex picks in the meta right now. He can go top and become unkillable pretty much with that double health bar that he has with the gray health shield, as well as the mobility with his ult being able to essentially have a second teleport that has a faster channel time, as well as being able to mobilize people across the map and protect carries with the Devourer on friendlies, as well as nice laning tools with the Devourer and other forms of inherent damage that he has, and since it is a flex pick for either support or top, good choice to get rid of it. The last ban coming out from Origin is going to be Ryze. Ryze, another huge late game scaling pick here. Pretty much when Ryze gets to his full late game potential, almost unkillable, dealing massive amounts of area of effect damage all across the team, creaming anybody. We've seen Faker we've seen what he can do on Ryze, and since then other people have been picking it up. Just a very strong pick with no inherent counter picks available that necessarily completely shut down Ryze, so just a good takeaway, especially from a skilled mid laner such as Febabin. Now, moving into the first drafting phase, we're going to have the first pick coming out from Fnatic, and they're going to pick up the Poppy. Now, Poppy, if you watched the LCS in the first week of this, has been a very popular pick, mostly for the support role, but still can be flex top. Now, Poppy is a really good choice in the fact that, A, it is a flex pick and not giving anything away, both positionally or on team comp, what you're going for. So, essentially, a very safe first pick. Also, Poppy is very good in the sense that it can disable with the new effects that she has on her ability since the rework, disable any dashes for either potential engages or disengages. So she kind of has a block on those dashes, which is extremely good. The ult is a very good form of disengage as well as engage. If she does the first initial cast without charging it, it just knocks them up right next to her and does nice damage. Also, whenever she is, whatever lane she's in, whether it be top or bottom, those kind of close condensed lane, especially with the wall being so close, has nice procs where she can get her stun off and use that to not only CC, but kind of create plays and exert pressure in lane, and then her roaming capacity also is in the same effect with her abilities I've already described, so a very good first pick. Moving on to the second drafting phase, we're going to have Origin picking up Lissandra and Lee Sin. Now we know Lee Sin's probably going to Amazing. Amazing is pretty good on Lee Sin. That's probably one of his best champions. Lee Sin provides a lot of early gank pressure, being able to land those Qs from the frog and being able to cover a large amount of distance in your gank pathing, as well as being able to go over walls, especially with the poacher's knife, incorporating that sightstone into his jungle item. Makes him a very good safe pick. I don't know if I would have chose this pick with the Poppy exposed because any Q engages can be disengaged with that Poppy ability, so kind of making Amazing really need to question when he's going to go in and if he can successfully go in. But overall, a high early game damage AD jungler that Amazing is comfortable on. So a decent pickup for Origin. Now the Lissandra top, if you've watched LCK regions, Lissandra has been a huge menace in the top lane, very strong, deals a lot of nice magic damage, has AoE, has a lot of CC, especially with the point and click of her ult, as well as the other forms of CC that she has, as well as the mobility with the Q, and just general high levels of magic damage, while still getting tanky with the recent buffs to the Roa that have been experienced in the preseason. Very strong in the top lane, a good pickup again. Moving on to the third drafting phase, we're going to have Fnatic picking up Lucian and LeBlanc for the mid lane. So as we can see, Lucian is probably the most self-explanatory pick of this entire drafting phase. Lucian is probably one of the strongest ADCs right now, especially with the 6.1 nerfs to Misfortune, besides Corki, who is also very strong right now. But Lucian just has the ability, especially with getting mana back from Essence Reaver, to constantly throw out those Qs for not only in-lane poke and dominance there, but also pushing ability in wave clear, combined with the culling, as well as his other abilities in proccing his passive. So just a very strong, safe ADC to blind pick. There's not too many matchups where he necessarily is going to be losing, especially with the combination of Poppy to exert that insane lane dominance that they can in the bot lane. If Poppy's going support at this time, which Origin does not know, but probably can safely assume. So very strong, very safe ADC pick to blind pick into. Now, the LeBlanc pick was a bit strange. Obviously, they're going to have to blind pick their mid laner anyways, so they want to obviously put priority on Fevabin's LeBlanc. We know Fevabin can play LeBlanc. He's very good, very skilled mid laner that really now has a chance to shine on this team without big members such as Huni in the lineup to do this, as well as Yellow Star kind of having Reckless clean up all those fights. So we really get to see Fevabin really exert his skill, and who better to do that on than an assassin-based LeBlanc. Now with Thunderlord still being really OP coming into 6.1, LeBlanc just is another reason to play her as a huge nuker. He's going to be able to chunk out Lissandra. He's going to be able to chunk out Lee Sin, who aren't going to get insanely taky and unkillable. So those are still all burstable targets. Also, there's not too many lane matchups that LeBlanc loses through blind picking. We can see maybe Syndra has been rumored to be a counterpick to LeBlanc, but it hasn't been executed on the stage. I have not seen that. Also, there's really few matchups where at worst she goes even or gets a small jump behind, but she can still roam, still has that capacity to make plays around the map, and if she gets ahead, the snowball potential is huge with just constantly scaling damage to unbelievable potential. So let's move on to the fourth drafting phase that I've outlined in green. This is going to be Origin drafting again. They're going to be picking up Trundle and Ezreal in the bot lane. Obviously, they're going to be choosing their bot lane at this point in the draft to save the counter pick for Power of Evil on the last draft, seeing they are on red side. Now, when we get into what they like about this draft, specifically from Origin, is they're picking up the Trundle. Trundle has insane stat steals. Now, remember, this is 6.1, so he has been nerfed a bit. There is more mana cost on the pillar. There is a longer cooldown on the ultimate, as well as I believe an increased mana cost, but that still doesn't matter because he's still stealing those stats. The damage on the turret nerf of his Q really doesn't matter too much because he's going to be played in that support role, and pretty much can be assumed that he's going to be playing in that support role, meaning that stat steal, he's going to be able to steal those resists away from the Poppy and anyone else who's going to be getting tanky, and just becomes a huge lane bully. And I really like the combo of Trundle and Ezreal. So Sven is picking up Ezreal here. Ezreal is pretty weak in the early game, especially if you're going to have to be picking up tier and other items that are just going to scale. But once he gets to mid game, he's pretty good. But Ezreal has insane poke, as you know, if you've played Ezreal or played against him, those Q pokes, especially if he's going to be going a blue build Ezreal. He's going to be picking up Manamune. He's going to be picking up the gauntlet, as well as just having all those procs on those Qs. Now with the Trundle, what I like about that synergy is Pillar really allows you to set up a lot of that poke, meaning that Sven's going to be hitting a lot of poke in this lane if the Pillar synergy is on point with both Mithy and Sven. So I think it's a really good combo and synergy in the bot lane that's also ready to transition to team fighting while you're going to have massive damage coming out from Sven, especially with a little bit of an AoE of his ult and then the poke potential that he has. And then the zoning potential and stat stealing nature of Trundle just makes that very versatile, not only in lane, but also in the greater team fight phase. And against Lucian, the poking that Sven can offer, he can dodge those Q pokes and dodge that piercing light and then try to get different angles and pretty much have freedom to poke Reckless out if he can, if they get that lane dominance. A really good head-to-head matchup in the bot lane at this point in the draft. Now, moving on to the fifth stage of the draft is going to be Fnatic's last drafting phase, be able to round out their team comp. They pick up the Zac for Spirit in the jungle and Olaf for Gamsu. Now, I love the Zac pick. Zac jungle is probably one of my favorite jungle picks right now. He just does so much, not necessarily damage as other junglers right now, but only does he provide great front line with his tank and then the passive where essentially you need to either focus the bloblets down or attempt to re-kill him, providing that nice safety for going into those risky engages. But his slingshot is insane. He has opened up so many more gank paths that are now, reopened with the new vision patch that we had in the preseason. Just to remind you guys, now there are no purchasing of green wards, meaning the only way you get green wards is either from a sightstone or from a trinket. And seeing how we're going to have sweepers coming out and we're going to have oracle lenses coming out, we're not necessarily going to have as much green ward vision control on the map, so you're no longer going to be able to afford to just randomly green ward, into various areas such as Wraith Pits, such as areas over walls in the river, where you would be able to predict those Zac and have vision of those Zac jumping positions, and all those interesting gank paths are now reopened with the insane range on the slingshot, meaning that Zac is probably the most versatile jungler of this patch, and I think we're going to be seeing a lot of him in the future. Now, the Olaf pick, is a bit interesting going into Lissandra. Lissandra is going to be a bit on the squishy side, and if Olaf can get ahead, he can steamroll over her. And looking at the rest of their team, as of this point, we don't know what Power of Evil is playing, but Olaf is pretty good because Olaf with Ragnarok is going to be able to chase down that Ezreal. So the kiting ability of Blue Ezreal is ultimately going down. He's going to be able to run through that pillar slow, not going to really phase him too much. Any CC coming out of Soaz really isn't going to be able to do much, and he's pretty much going to be over to steamroll this team if he gets that early lead on Soaz. Inherently, just looking at the top lane matchup purely from a draft perspective, I would say I would give the slight edge to Lissandra just because it is a range v melee matchup, and the CC that Soaz has just from the kit of Lissandra should give him a bit of an advantage, but Olaf can easily overtake the lane if he gets that slight early game advantage onto Soaz. So very good pick, kind of rounding this off, pretty much making a full engage comp for Fnatic. It's not necessarily a pick comp while they have the capacity to make picks, but their entire comp is all about going in balls deep to the enemy team, really forcing fights and pretty much being all engage, all in fight all the time, and they can start to fight early. You have the Poppy engage for the bottom lane, you have the Zac slingshot that's going to be available very early, you're going to have the Fevabin blow up, assassinate damage that he can come, jump into any of those team fights, and even initiate and get CC with his chain, and you're going to be able to layer a lot of this CC. If we're going to have a bounce around coming out from Spirit on Zac, it's pretty much going to be able to set up a chain for Fevabin, or be able to set up a nice angle to get a wall stun for Noxiac with the Poppy. So I think this really heavy team fight focused team comp is pretty strong coming out of the draft of Fnatic. Now to kind of get into the last drafting phase of the game from Origin, picking the counter pick for mid on the red side for Power of Evil, they pick up Orianna. Now, Orianna is, I think, a very safe pick to pick into this matchup. So Orianna pretty much succeeds in almost any mid matchup because she can sit under tower and farm if anything goes wrong. I don't think she has too much lane pressure against Fevavin, especially against that LeBlanc, because just out of Oriana's kit, she's not going to be looking for those solo kills, while Thunderlords does give her a bit of more damage, especially in the laning phase, and a potential to burst people down with a surprise Shockwave auto attack W to completely burst someone out. I don't really see that happening. I think Fevavin will be able to easily dodge a lot of the shockwaves and poke coming out of lane just from the pure mobility of the distortions coming out from LeBlanc, but I think Power of Evil is in a good position to just to be able to farm up, put a ball on Lee Sin and when he goes in, or put the ball on Lissandra when he goes in, and also provide a little more protection for Sven and protection for anybody on the team using those shieldings from the ball to just kind of set it up. I think it's just a very safe, zone-orientated team comp coming out from Origin. So I've already talked about how Fnatic's team comp is very engaged, focused, and how all their tools allow them to team fight early, team fight hard. Now what we're looking to Origin is a lot more zone control. So we're going to have early jungle pressure that should be coming out of Amazing's Lee Sin here, because that's just what Lee Sin needs to do to be able to fulfill his role as an early game jungler. And we're going to have a lot of zone control coming out from the Trundle, a lot of zone control coming out from the from the Oriana, excuse me, with the ball control and being able to control zones of pressure around any key engage points, as well as just the CC of Lissandra coming in, and the point click CC of the ult being able to create that zone of slow. So very much a zone controlled base um, comp coming out from Origins with the engage that Amazing can provide on the Lee Sin, and then to top it off, while they're going to have all these zones of slow and CC and pressure that they do, they can barrel people in to the poke of Sven, because if Sven at least maintains a decent lane standing, he's going to be able to do massive damage with his Q, going to be able to keep throwing those out, doing the poke, and then when push comes to shove, he's going to be able to either engage with an arcane shift and get into those fights, or be in such a position that he can take riskier attempts at poking while still being able to arcane out. But I've already talked about how Olaf can maybe counter that factor in the game. I have watched the VOD for this game, but I'm not going to go into how these team comps actually play themselves out. If you know the results, you kind of get it. But just coming from a pure draft perspective, I think honestly I would give the edge to Fnatic with the pure engage comp. I think with the amount of engage and team fighting that they're going to be looking to go for, while Origins kind of go for their classic farm slash zone control game, I think Fnatic can surprise Origin by kind of rushing them at these key points, rushing them at opportunities where they don't think they're going to be engaged on, or they don't think Fnatic is going to commit to those heavy team fights. And I think the CC as well as the damage coming out Fnatic should give them a slight edge in this game. If you've watched the VOD, you know that Fnatic ends up winning this, and we can talk about the implications of that in a different video. But thanks guys for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Remember to rate, comment, and subscribe, and peace.